Welcome back to Manhwa Recap Vault. Today we are covering a story that has conquered every platform it has touched. A web novel with over 1,500 chapters on Nava. A manhwa adaptation that ran 152 episodes across 2 seasons on Webtoon. And a fanbase that spans the entire Murim genre community. This is a story about legacy, grief, comedy, and the most aggressively uncooperative protagonist in manhwa history. Let us begin. He carved through the heavenly demon with a broken sword, one arm gone, intestines held in by willpower and spite. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint, the greatest swordsman of his generation, the pride of Mount Hua, drove his shattered blade through the throat of evil itself, and ended a war that had consumed the martial world for decades. And then he died. On the summit of the heavenly demon's mountain, surrounded by the bodies of everyone he had ever loved, Chung Myung breathed his last, knowing he had won, and knowing that the victory had cost everything. 100 years later, he wakes up. He is 15 years old. He is starving. He is lying in a gutter. And the Mount Hua Sect, the institution he gave his life to protect, the greatest sword sect the world had ever produced, is a crumbling ruin, staffed by a handful of talentless children who can barely hold their weapons the right way round. This is Return of the Mount Hua Sect, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the finest martial arts stories ever committed to paper or screen. To understand what Chung Myung wakes up to, you must first understand what Mount Hua was. In the world of this story, the martial arts landscape is dominated by powerful organizations called sects. These sects train warriors, develop sword techniques, maintain political alliances, and project power across the central plains of a fictionalized historical China. The greatest of these, the 10 great sects, are institutions of extraordinary prestige, each with centuries of tradition, unique martial arts, and legions of disciples who dedicate their lives to mastering their sect's way of the sword. Mount Hua was the jewel among them. The Huasan sect, the Mount Hua sect, was synonymous with beauty and lethality. Their signature techniques revolved around the plum blossom, flowing, elegant, devastatingly precise swordsmanship that combined artistry with killing power. The 24 Plum Blossom Sword, their supreme technique, was considered one of the most refined martial arts in existence. Their disciples were envied. Their elders were feared. Their reputation was unassailable. And then the heavenly demon came. The Cheonma, the leader of the demonic cult, waged a war against the righteous sects that tore the martial world apart. Alliances shattered, cities burned. The greatest warriors of every major sect marched to war, and most of them did not return. It was an extinction-level event for the martial arts world, a conflict so devastating that entire sects were erased from history. Mount Hua was not erased. Mount Hua won, but winning cost them everything. Chung Myung, the 13th disciple, the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, one of the 3 great swordsmen of his era, fought the heavenly demon in single combat at the summit of the enemy's mountain. The battle was catastrophic. Chung Myung lost his left arm. His body was carved open in a dozen places. His sword shattered mid-strike. He won anyway, with a broken blade and a body held together by nothing but fury and devotion. Chung Myung killed the heavenly demon, and then, surrounded by the corpses of his sect brothers, every single one of them dead, the entire generation that had marched to war lying cold on that mountaintop, he sat down, looked at the sky, and let go. His last thought was of his sect. His last hope was that the disciples they had left behind, the young ones, the ones too green to fight, would carry Mount Hua forward. that the sacrifice meant something, that the sect he loved would endure. It did not. 100 years pass, and Chung Myung wakes up. He does not wake up gracefully. There is no divine chamber, no cosmic explanation, no benevolent deity welcoming him back to the land of the living. He wakes up in the body of a teenage beggar, starving, filthy, weak, and profoundly confused. He was the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. He killed the heavenly demon, and now he is a child named Chosm, scrounging for food in a world that has moved on without him. The disorientation is immediate, visceral, and, because this is the genius of this story, hilarious. Chung Myung does not adjust gracefully to his new reality. He is loud, he is abrasive, he is profoundly impatient with everyone and everything around him, because he has the perspective of an 80-year veteran warrior trapped in the body and social status of a 15-year-old street urchin. He understands martial arts at a level that the current generation cannot even conceptualize, but his body is weak, untrained, and utterly incapable of executing the techniques his mind remembers perfectly. The comedy of Return of the Mount Hua Sect comes from this gap, the chasm between who Chung Myung was and what he now appears to be. He looks like a bratty teenager. He talks like a bratty teenager. He acts, frequently, like a bratty teenager. But behind the volume and the arrogance and the relentless, combative personality is a man who watched everyone he loved die and is processing that grief through a century of temporal distance and a body that will not stop demanding snacks. When he discovers that Mount Hua still exists, barely, he makes his way there. And what he finds is devastating. The sect is impoverished. Their once magnificent training grounds are overgrown and deteriorating. The current sect leader, Hyun Jong, is a kind and well-meaning man who presides over a handful of students, most of whom are mediocre, undertrained, and studying techniques that have been corrupted through a century of degrading transmission. The Plum Blossom swordsmanship that Chung Myung created, refined, and perfected has been butchered beyond recognition, watered down, misremembered, taught by people who never understood its principles in the first place. Mount Hua is not just weak. Mount Hua is a joke. The sect that once stood at the pinnacle of the martial world is now ranked below their geographic neighbors, the Zhongnan sect, who have replaced them among the 10 great sects. The name, Mount Hua, now carries the same weight as a historical footnote, something people remember vaguely. The way you might remember a restaurant that closed before you were born. And Chung Myung, the man who died for this sect, who sacrificed everything to give it a future, stands in the crumbling training hall and watches children fumble through a debased version of his own sword techniques. The emotional weight of this moment is extraordinary, because Chung Myung does not weep. He does not deliver a dramatic monologue about loss and betrayal. He watches the children train, and his face does something complicated. And then he says something rude about their footwork. That is who he is. The grief does not disappear. It goes underground. It fuels everything he does from this point forward, and it surfaces at moments that are devastating precisely because they are unexpected. But on the surface, Chung Myung is chaos. Loud, greedy, manipulative, abrasive, perpetually hungry, and absolutely certain that everyone around him is an idiot who needs his guidance, whether they want it or not. Chung Myung joins the sect as a third-class disciple, the lowest rank, the newest arrival. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody suspects that this obnoxious teenager is the reincarnated Plum Blossom Sword Saint. They see a loud, disrespectful brat who somehow passes the entrance exam through techniques that are crude but strangely effective. And then Chung Myung begins to work. not on himself, though he trains his new body relentlessly, rebuilding the physical foundation he needs to execute the martial arts locked in his memory. He works on the sect, on the disciples, on the institution itself, because Chung Myung understands something that his past self did not. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint died on that mountain because he had treated the sect's future as someone else's responsibility. He had burned the greatest individual warrior of his era, and it had not been enough. Individual strength means nothing if the sect around you crumbles. This time, Chung Myung does not intend to be a hero. He intends to build an army. His methods are, to put it diplomatically, unorthodox. He bullies the third-class disciples into training harder, not through inspiration, through relentless, merciless, sometimes borderline sadistic pressure that makes their previous training look like a holiday. He runs them until they collapse. He critiques their swordsmanship with the clinical precision of a master who created the techniques they are butchering. He pushes them past limits they did not know they had, and when they break through, he pushes harder. The results are staggering. The third-class disciples of Mount Hua, the weakest, most overlooked students in the sect, begin to transform. Their swordsmanship sharpens. Their physical conditioning improves dramatically. Their understanding of the plum blossom techniques deepens as Chung Myung, through hints and demonstrations and carefully managed revelations, reintroduces elements of the original martial arts that had been lost. Baek Cheon, the leading disciple of his generation, the one the sect had pinned its hopes on, is initially Chung Myung's primary antagonist within Mount Hua. He is proud, talented by modern standards, and deeply offended by this newcomer who disrespects every tradition and hierarchy the sect maintains. Their rivalry is one of the great pleasures of the early story, because Baek Cheon is not wrong to be offended, and Chung Myung is not wrong to consider him inadequate. They are both right, and the friction between them produces some of the most entertaining exchanges in the entire genre. Yu Isiol, the ice sword Plum Blossom, a prodigy of the Yue Maiden sword style, is Chung Myung's mirror in many ways. She is quiet where he is loud, restrained where he is explosive, and genuinely talented in a way that makes Chung Myung notice her immediately. Of all the current disciples, she is the closest to understanding the original spirit of Mount Hua's martial arts, and Chung Myung respects that, though he would sooner eat his own sword than admit it out loud. Jo Gil, Yun Jong, Tang Soso. Each disciple Chung Myung takes under his wing has their own arc, their own limitations, their own moment of breakthrough. The story invests in these characters, not as accessories to the protagonist, but as the living proof of his philosophy. When Tang Soso, a healer in a sect of swordsmen, discovers her value on the battlefield, it is not Chung Myung's victory. It is Mount Hua's. When Yun Jong, who lacks the natural genius of Baek Cheon or the instinctive brilliance of Yu Isiol, compensates through sheer determination and tactical intelligence, the story celebrates effort as loudly as it celebrates talent. The training arc escalates into competition. Mount Hua enters tournaments against other sects, events where their disciples are expected to be humiliated, where their reputation as a fallen sect precedes them. The Zhongnan sect, which replaced Mount Hua among the 10 great sects, treats them as an afterthought. The Southern Edge sect sends their best with the confident assumption that Mount Hua's students will provide easy victories and public embarrassment. They are wrong. The reaction of the martial world when Mount Hua's third-class disciples begin demolishing opponents from sects that had written them off is nothing short of electrifying. Not because Chung Myung fights for them, he does when necessary, and when he does, the results are spectacular, but because the disciples themselves have become genuinely formidable. They fight with a precision and ferocity that makes the watching elders of other sects deeply uncomfortable, because it suggests that Mount Hua's decline was never about ability. It was about teaching, and someone, somehow, has started teaching again. This is the engine of the story, not Chung Myung fighting alone. Chung Myung building something. Watching the sect transform. Watching disciples who believed they were worthless discover that they are carrying the legacy of the greatest sword sect in history, and that legacy is not dead. It was just waiting for someone to teach it properly. Here is what elevates Return of the Mount Hua Sect from excellent entertainment to genuinely great storytelling. Chung Myung is funny. He is relentlessly, consistently, structurally funny. The kind of protagonist who can carry an entire chapter on personality alone. His interactions with the bewildered sect elders, his abuse of Baek Cheon, his mercenary obsession with money, his theatrical outrage at the state of the sect's tea collection. The comedy is sharp, character-driven, and never forced. But underneath all of it is a grief so profound that when it surfaces, it can stop you cold. Everyone Chung Myung knew is dead. Not recently dead. Dead for 100 years. His sect brothers who marched to war beside him, dead. His sect leader, Chung Myung, the Daxian sword, who led them into battle, dead. His one true friend, Tang Bo, the mischievous, brilliant scion of the Tang family, who matched Chung Myung's energy blow for blow, dead. The woman he might have loved, the elders who raised him, the generation that defined his entire existence. All of them are names in history books now, and most of the history books have forgotten them too. Chung Myung walks through a sect full of people who worship the Plum Blossom Sword Saint as a legend. They revere his memory. They have statues. They tell stories. And not a single one of them knows that the man they are venerating is standing right next to them, telling them their sword stance is atrocious. The loneliness of this is staggering. There are moments, rare, carefully placed, where the mask slips, where Chung Myung sees something that reminds him of the past. A particular way a plum blossom falls, a phrase that Chung Myung used to say. A technique executed with a grace that echoes something he remembers from a century ago. And in those moments, the comedy stops. And what remains is a man who is building a future for his sect because the past destroyed him, and he refuses to let it happen again. The title of this story is Return of the Mount Hua Sect, not Return of Chung Myung. The story understands that distinction perfectly. Chung Myung's arc is not about regaining his personal power, though he does, methodically and impressively. His arc is about ensuring that Mount Hua never again depends on a single warrior. He was the strongest, and it was not enough. This time, the sect itself must be strong. Every disciple, every technique, every tradition, the foundation matters more than the peak. That is not a common theme in martial arts fiction. Most stories in this genre celebrate individual supremacy, the solo cultivator who ascends above all others through talent and determination. Return of the Mount Hua Sect argues that individual supremacy is a death sentence if it exists in isolation. Chung Myung was the greatest, and the greatest died alone on a mountaintop while his sect crumbled behind him. The emotional resonance of this story comes from watching a man who learned the hardest possible lesson about the limits of personal power dedicate his second life to building something that will survive without him. That is not a power fantasy. That is a story about love. Beyond the sect walls, the martial world is vast and dangerous. The demonic cult that Chung Myung destroyed has not stayed destroyed. A century of recovery has allowed dark forces to reconsolidate and the threat of demonic martial arts resurfaces throughout the story. The other great sects, some allies, some rivals, some actively hostile to Mount Hua's resurgence, create a political landscape that Chung Myung must navigate with the same cunning he applies to swordsmanship. The novel, written by Beggar, has amassed over 1,500 chapters on Nava and Munpia, with over 1,100 translated to English. It is ongoing and shows no signs of slowing. The Manhwa adaptation by Studio Leko ran for 2 seasons on Webtoon, 72 chapters in the first season, 80 in the second, culminating in 152 episodes that cover the early arcs of the novel with exceptional production quality. The series is officially titled Return of the Blossoming Blade, in English on Webtoon. No anime adaptation has been officially announced as of March 2026, though fan demand is immense, and the property's commercial profile suggests it is a matter of when, not if. The scope of what remains unadapted in the manhwa is enormous. The novel's later arcs expand the world dramatically. Alliances between sects, full-scale wars against demonic factions, Chung Myung's confrontation with the legacy of the original heavenly demon battle, and the continued growth of Mount Hua's disciples into warriors worthy of the name their sect carries. Return of the Mount Hua Sect is available on Webtoon in English under the title Return of the Blossoming Blade. 2 seasons, 152 episodes of a story that combines the best martial arts action in the genre with comedy that consistently lands and emotional depth that earns every moment of impact. If you want a protagonist who is simultaneously the funniest and most tragic character in his own story, a man who hides a century of grief behind insults, greed, and an unshakable commitment to restoring something greater than himself, this is your manhwa. It is not just one of the best Murim stories. It is one of the best stories. Full stop. If this breakdown earned your time, consider subscribing. Manhwa Recap Vault covers the most compelling stories in the genre every week. I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.